Hi everybody, this is pianist Mackenzie Melemed. Welcome back to another Pianostics video. For those of you joining in for the first time, a big welcome to you. I'm a 29-year-old classical pianist. I did my training at the Juilliard School in New York City with Robert McDonald and Emmanuel Axe, and I've been teaching privately since graduating in 2020. I currently reside in Helsinki, Finland, and I recently had the idea of promoting education for classical piano, especially trying to share some of the knowledge that I've gained. It's invaluable information from fantastic teachers while studying at Juilliard. I would really appreciate it if you like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and also share with your classical piano communities as well. These 15-minute lessons, my first series, they're going to cover a wide variety of different repertoire from Bach to Chopin. We'll be discussing elements of like fingering, phrasing, articulation, how to think about the overall architecture of the piece, and hopefully there'll be something in every episode that you can apply to your own practicing to help make it more efficient, practicing smarter so you can learn more in less time, and also get right to focusing on the musical content in the score. So I really appreciate you being here with me, and without further ado, let's jump into the lessons.
In this lesson, we'll be looking again at some Schumann. This is the 13th miniature of Kinderszenen, Op.15, also known as Scenes from Childhood. This one is probably the most moving and the most important to me. As I said in a previous video about this work, there was a very famous recording of Alfred Cortot performing this on a VHS recording called Great Pianists of the 20th Century. And he was speaking in French, which I would later understand after studying French in high school, about how to play this piece and how the music almost levitates off the score and creates a very mysterious, because we don't really know how to contain this music. When I first started, I played this work very, very slowly. And then you look at the metronome marking of 1/12 to the quarter note, and it's practically one half note per second, which is a little bit quicker than how ultimately I would like to do this. So we're going to get to the tempo, but the four ideas to think about in the game plan start with one which I start with pretty much all the time, is labeling the sections and finding the similar phrases, and if we can, identify where the phrases stop and where new ones begin. This piece is a little bit different than the other ones we've covered so far because this is not so repetitive. We don't see the same themes coming back, but if we do start with the first idea, I suppose we have the first 8 bars, which is not too uncommon. And then he gives us a second idea, and it's interesting, in the middle of the phrase, he suddenly drops the whole phrase, and we have, 4 fermatas in this measure. We see here the second measure of the second phrase, and then we see it written again, where we have 3 fermatas written in the next measure, and then we go off into a very long sequence, almost like a coda of its own or a small cadenza. And this is time for the pianist to kind of look almost, it reminds me of looking at some Couperin or Rameau in some works from the early Baroque, where we would see music written without any of the bar lines. So it was very unmeasured and free for the pianist. And this is kind of reminiscent of that, that we have this very pure single line, which later is accompanied by the left hand, that has its own phrase. But to start almost like a recitativo from an opera, a single line of worry or of wonder, however you'd like to interpret that line. This is something that's a little bit extraordinary from what I would call a section or a theme. So I'm going to label it here, and it's almost something else. It's just something that goes beyond the frame of the piece for me at this section, is really on a level all its own. And then we come back and we have again the opening phrase. And the last line is basically taken from the last two measures of the first section, and it is made into a coda where it's strung out for a while. So a very interesting short form, it's a very small miniature, but we do feel like we go somewhere much further than in some of the other works that tend to be a little bit more circular in the way that the themes repeat. So then we're going to assign a character to each. So let's get an idea of the sound in first playing. I'm going to play it at the tempo that's written here, and then we can also explore different possible tempos. So that's our first section. For me, looking at that it's written in the common time, 4/4, there's something about it that makes me always feel a little bit rushed, and I would honestly like to play it a little bit slower, because when I think of it, it's more or less, it looks like it's in 2 because we don't really have that much quarter note action bringing us forward. So if we count to ourselves or in our heads, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, 1. And that's even I wanted to go to 3 because for me, there's something very boxy about thinking in terms of the half notes that can really kind of stunt the growth of the line and keep us kind of basically interacting only on this half note every half a bar. We're kind of resetting, or we're finding ourselves being pulled down. And I think if we imagine the poet speaks, the poet having something very profound to say, I don't think the meter is going to be all like this. This is kind of trying to mimic what we have in our first line. But when we start to think in 4, and maybe we don't slow the tempo down, but the importance of really hearing that quarter note in between and counting that for yourself helps you and also helps the flow of the music so that it actually seems like there's more going on in between the half notes so that we feel some sort of horizontal motion, even though we're not playing anything in the middle of those. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. 1. I always play that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So just hearing the beat in the middle gives us that acknowledgement of the space that we need in between each so that we don't sound, that we're not preparing each half note, and that it becomes a little bit too static with, with the constant feeling that we're arriving, but the quarter note allows us to think much more horizontally so that these half notes are actually markers that are not to be specifically marked in a way, but they are kind of just landmarks on our way to where we're going. And I think actually there isn't really a specific place, at least for me, in this first section where we're headed. I think even this is going to the downbeat. And this is going to the downbeat, but there's no particular arrival, so that it's we go and we come back, and we go, and there's this kind of, I guess, terrain that we're traversing, but not a specific, we would led to be believed from the score that we finish here. And then what do we do for the rest of the time? And the worst thing we could do, we hear this, but that is not the goal. Bam, ba-da-da-da-dam, bam, bam. So we try to smooth that out, and hearing what the, time signature is, and that the quarter notes are really, really important. That's going to help a lot in your conception and keeping this flow alive in otherwise what looks like it can be a very static section. When we go into the second section, we're going to have a kind of a purposeful stop on the side of Schumann's writings. So I think when I was younger, I would anticipate a lot of times a ritardando or a fermata on the horizon. And a lot of times it's better to really see the purpose in what those are. And if we follow the line musically, it really stops and asks a question, in this diminished chord. But it's only as we kind of rise to this C above middle C. And I think hearing this F sharp to the G to the C is something that we need, and it doesn't really make sense to kind of halt ourselves as we get up there. If we're needing to, run up the hill, we need all of the energy we can, at least enough energy, rather than to stop in anticipation. Because we have a stop followed by another stop. So it's nice to have the energy and then have to run out of it. And the same thing on the second go of it. And we can feel this tension with the ritardando. Another idea is when you are playing ritardando, let's say these four notes over the course of the measure, how much is too much or how little is too little ritardando to make the idea that we have some tension in our phrase? So I'm going to play a little bit of an exaggeration of what's too much and too little that's going to be obvious for anyone that has any idea about a musical interpretation. It sounded very straightforward. It didn't have the idea of the rits. It didn't honor the idea of the fermatas. That idea actually sounded like we had quarter notes instead of the eighth notes written there by Schumann. So how do we feel like it's a natural ritardando? And something for me is I kind of picture, if you think about perhaps maybe rolling a ball down a hill as it comes back up, it's going to face a very natural and, obviously scientific amount of friction from gravity kind of saying, okay, no, you're not going up anymore. And I think that kind of thinking, when we're pushing a little bit against, rather than da ba ba bum 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 bum. It's not really a natural close if we think about the ball kind of coming down and going up. It's only going to reach so high. And I think of this la ta 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 ta. And so in this context, 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and it's kind of gaining a little bit of momentum as it comes back down. And that's also helped by the diminished chord that we have. And let's look quickly at this solo section, which I think should really be treated like it's completely separated from this work. You can almost think of it as in a tempo that may be slightly faster, slightly slower. We've got fermatas, and it's a place for you to really explore the single line and the shaping of this single line. So we come back there, and it can be very weightless, very timeless, that we almost lose ourselves in finding the beauty of the line. It doesn't have to be I think that's what we want to avoid. If we think 1, 2, 3, and we try to play within the lines of our framework, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, fermata. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we kind of see, and we can be, not following the metronome, but we can be following our own intuition on how we stretch the tempo and how we do it in a very naturally elastic way, rather than forcing something that's much faster or much slower, so that we can keep free and we can keep kind of to our own devices on how we'd like to go forward with this. But also we stay within the framework of a pulse that we choose. And when we stick to that, we're very much straddling the border of, the outer extremes of our tempo and what we can do with it. When we get to the last line is a really nice challenge of my last point, which is called breathing through rests, because it's very easy to just kind of drop off and end all of the tension here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. A lot of people play and then they just finish. So even allowing the sound to kind of go away, it's also releasing a lot of the tension. And what we've been doing throughout this whole work, and I think what most people are doing in their interpretation, is that they're trying to keep the beauty of the sound, especially in a long, flowing melody. We need to keep the sound alive, and we can't let it die. So if we have we're kind of going through it, letting it to the last moment, and trying to imagine that the sound is staying until our next chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And keep in mind we have a ritardando over this whole final last line. So we do have a lot of room that we keep the sound is gently fading away. We're headed kind of down towards the lower part of the piano. And slower and fading and fading. So don't look at the rests like endpoints. Think of them as places to hear in your mind that the notes are continuing, and that when we pick up with our next resonance, so from this A minor to the A diminished chord, we really hear that, so we can remember what our last sound was and train our muscles and our sound production to kind of keep that same sound as we get quieter and as we lean more into the ritardando. This has been a quick lesson covering The Poet Speaks of Schumann's Kinderszenen Op.15, the last miniature. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you'd like to hear next.